On to question 11. This is a table where you've got to fill in the missing parts of the table. It's a very important skill to be able to convert between fractions, decimal fractions, and percentages. So you often are going to get this question in one form or another. So it's really, really important that we can go in any direction and find the equivalent form of a number. So whether it's a percentage that you need to convert to a fraction, or a decimal that you need to convert to a percentage, anyway, they can ask you to convert in any direction, and you have to understand the basic concepts behind it. So question A, we start with the simplest form. We've been given 1/4, and the next column is hundredths. So all we have to do is what times 4 gets us to 100. You should know that. We just have to times it by 25, and to keep it equivalent, what you do to the denominator, you have to do to the numerator. So that's going to give us 25 over 100, which is the same thing. It's equivalent to a quarter. Decimal fraction, well, as soon as we've got denominators that are 10, 100, or 1,000, it's very straightforward to express it as a decimal. So that's 25 hundredths, so that's 0.25, and they've given us the percentage 25%. Question B, we've been given the decimal fraction 0.1, that means 1/10, so that's pretty straightforward to write as a common fraction. That's 1/10. Simplest form, oh sorry, I didn't answer that correctly. That second column is hundredths, so it's actually not 1/10. The denominator needs to be 100, so it's not 1/100, it's going to be 10/100. So if you can imagine, if I just added a 0 there, that would be 10 hundredths. And then we've actually got the answer now to the first column. Simplest form is going to be just 1/10. Okay, and then finally the percentage, 0.1, that's not 1%. Remember, it's percentages mean per 100, so you have to look at the hundredths. So it's 10/100, which is 10%. So it's always important, percentage, you've got to get it somehow to a denominator of 100. Now the last question, this is definitely the one that's trying to challenge you and sort of separate guys who have their basic knowledge and guys who can, really handle it in a more tricky situation. So we've been given 37.5 over 100. Now it's always tricky to work with a fraction that's got a decimal in the numerator. So we've got a technique that we can use to move a comma in we can basically shift a decimal place by multiplying it by a certain amount. So to shift the decimal, we just actually need to times it by 10. But then we've got to remember the principle that what you do to the top, you have to do to the bottom. So 37.5 over 100 is the same thing as 375 over 1,000. And now we've actually got a fraction that has a whole number for a numerator, which means, and we've also got a denominator of 1,000, which means it's easy to represent it as a decimal. It's just going to be 0.375. And a percentage, now the percentage, it's really important that you realize that it's the first 2 digits after the comma that are your hundredths. So the percentage is definitely going to be 37, but then we've got an extra 5 there, so that's where we're going to have to add a comma again, 37.5%, which is basically the same as the numerator in the hundredths columns, because hundredths and percentages is the same thing. So we've got 37.5%. And the next part that's probably a little bit tricky is, well, how do we get the simplest possible form of the fraction 37.5 over 100? Well, it's definitely not. You can't have a simplest form that's a decimal, so I have to have it as a whole number. 375 over 1,000. There's a common factor between there's the 5s, but I'm rather going to get to a lower number straight away. So if I actually let me just rub this out quickly. The quickest way that I can get rid of the comma, if I'm not interested in what the denominator is just timesing the top and bottom by 2, because that will help me get rid of that comma. So that's going to give me an answer. 37,5 times 2, hopefully you can do that in your head, is 75 over 200. Now 75 over 200 definitely there's a common factor, and if you're quite sharp with your factors, you should realize that 25 goes into both 200 and into 75. 25 goes into 75 3 times, and 25 goes into 200 8 times. Now that is going to be the simplest form of the fraction with the whole number in the numerator and the denominator, 3 over 8. And we're done.